For years, I've been comfortable, even proud of the life Susan and I had built. Our jobs complemented each other. She brought style and elegance into homes through her interior design skills, and I helped people find those homes as a real estate agent. Our house naturally was a showcase of our combined talents, neatly decorated by Susan's impeccable taste. The idyllic life, or so it seemed. Then out of the blue, Dustin, a coworker of mine, pulled me aside during a break at the real estate office. "Hey man, have you been by your wife's office recently?" "No, why would I? She's pretty busy these days, and I don't want to disturb her." Dustin looked left and right before leaning in closer. "Listen, I heard some gossip. People are saying things about Susan and her boss Ted. I'm not trying to stir the pot, but maybe you should drop by unannounced. See what's going on." I felt a little concerned after Dustin made that statement. On one hand, Dustin could be a notorious gossip, always looking for drama. On the other hand, something in the pit of my stomach made me wonder if he could be right. Days passed and the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. I found myself checking Susan's social media, combing through her recent posts and photos, looking for a clue. Nothing seemed off. They were mostly work-related posts about our latest design projects, but the feeling persisted. I had never been the type to snoop, but I couldn't shake off the suspicion. One evening I was in our home office, printing some documents for a property listing, and Susan's laptop was right there, open and logged in. The screen displayed a chat window from someone named Mr. Romantic 77. The latest message read, "Had a great time last night. Same place, same time next week." I stared at the screen. I really couldn't believe what I was seeing. Great time last night. What was that supposed to mean? And who the heck was Mr. Romantic 77? Complicating matters. I recalled Susan mentioning, and after I was meeting the previous night, I'd been wrapped up in my own work and hadn't thought twice about it. But now the pieces started fitting together in a way that I didn't like. I heard Susan's footsteps approaching quickly. I closed the laptop and resumed my work. Susan came in making small talk and asking me what I was up to. "Just some late night work. Got a new property listing to finalize." I replied. She nodded and left the room. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, it was clear that I needed to get to the bottom of this. Dustin's warning, the chat messages, the secret of late-night meetings. It was all piling up. I knew I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. I had to find out the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The picture-perfect life we had built suddenly felt like a house of cards, fragile and unstable. I didn't want to believe that Susan could betray me, but the seeds of doubt were planted. Now they were starting to grow, clouding my thoughts and filling my days with unease. I knew I had to act and fast before this uncertainty consumed me. It was a Thursday evening when Susan told me about a last-minute work event she had to attend. Dressed in a sleek black dress and with her hair done just so, she looked like she was headed for an awards ceremony, rather than a work meeting. Her line was, "Ted needs me there to smooth with some high-profile clients," she explained. I tried to act casual, hiding the suspicion that had built up over the last few days. "Sounds important. You go knock them dead, honey." As she left, I waited a few minutes to make sure she was really gone. Then I made my decision. I had to know what was really going on. The drive felt like an eternity, thoughts racing through my mind. I trailed at a safe distance, careful not to be spotted. Susan drove downtown, and I felt a weird mix of relief and disappointment when she parked near a classy hotel, often used for corporate events. Maybe she was telling the truth. I thought that glimmer of hope vanished when another car pulled up beside her. Ted's luxury sedan. My heart sank as I watched them get out of their cars and share a hug that lasted just a moment too long to be considered professional. I sat there parked across the street, watching as they walked arm in arm into the hotel. The doorman greeted them like old friends, which made me wonder how often they had been there for a moment. I considered storming in there and confronting them on the spot, but that wouldn't solve anything. I needed to think, to plan, to be smart about this. Frustrated and disappointed, I started the car and drove back home. What now? How do I handle this? There was no easy way out. I booted up my computer and started researching divorce laws, infidelity, alimony. I had a lot to learn as much as I wanted to act on pure emotion. I knew I needed solid evidence to back up my claims. Susan had always been smart. She wouldn't make this easy, but then again, She had no idea I was onto her. As I began to map out my next steps, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Susan had made her choices. Now it was time for me to make mine. And the first thing on my list was gathering evidence that would bring her double life into the light. My phone buzzed on the desk, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Susan. The meeting went well. Be home soon. Love you. I stared at the message. The words, love you, staring back at me like a blatant lie. I couldn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I focused on the task at hand, telling myself that this was a beginning of the end. Sleep was a rare commodity after that night. While Susan continued her daily routine as if nothing had changed, I was left pondering my next steps. I needed evidence, irrefutable proof that would leave no room for doubt, but how would I gather it? My research led me to a set of online tools for gathering evidence in marital disputes, from software that could record chat logs to discrete cameras. The digital age seemed well equipped for this kind of betrayal, but those methods felt too invasive, too far removed from the man I considered myself to be. Then an idea hit me. I could check the phone records as the primary account holder for our family plan. I had access to detailed logs, including timestamps and durations of all incoming and outgoing calls and texts. After an hour of navigating my cellular provider's website, I found what I was looking for. There were countless calls and texts to a number I didn't recognize, all occurring during odd hours, late-night calls, weekend rendezvous. The phone records painted a clear picture, and there were frequent communications with Ted too, more than any work relationship would justify. The next step was tracking down Mr. Romantic 77, the mysterious guy she had been chatting with online. A few strategic internet searches led me to a forum where people like him and Susan coordinated their secret meetings. My stomach turned as I archived every piece of evidence. It was overwhelming, but I wasn't done yet. One evening, knowing Susan had another work event, I used the opportunity to act. I had purchased a small discrete camera that I could control remotely, placing it strategically in our living room, where Susan usually took her personal calls. I waited. It didn't take long before she entered the room, phone in hand, and began talking softly. I activated the camera from my phone, recording her conversation. My heart sank as I listened to her making plans for another secret meeting. With a heavy heart, I transferred the audio file to my growing archive of evidence, every new piece of proof, like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. But the alternative, living a lie, was no longer an option. In a folder on my computer, I compiled everything: the chat logs, the phone records, audio files, and even the post from the forum. The sum of all these parts was devastating. A detailed timeline of our affairs punctuated by lies and deceit. And I made copies, lots of them saved in different locations. I was now armed with the truth, and the truth was bulletproof. I sat back and looked at the folder, its simple title, holding the explosive contents within. The weight of what I had to do next loomed over me like a dark cloud. But there was no turning back. I was too far down this road to even consider it. My phone buzzed another message from Susan. Hey, are you okay? You seem distant lately. Distant was one way to put it. I looked at her message, the cursor blinking as if urging me to reply. But what could I say? I'm fine. Just gathering evidence to expose your betrayal. Instead, I put the phone down, leaving her message unanswered. I waited for the right moment, a point in time when everything aligned to deliver the knockout blow. It finally came one evening when Susan said she would be late. Another urgent work meeting, she claimed this time. I didn't even pretend to believe her. As soon as she left, I printed out all the evidence I collected: the phone records, chat logs, audio transcripts, and forum posts. It was a mountain of deception. I packaged it neatly in a brown envelope and labeled it with her name. Just doing that felt like lifting a heavy burden off my shoulders. But there was more to be done. I needed to make sure that she couldn't play the victim and spin the narrative in her favor. So, I reached out to our closest friends and family, inviting them over for what I described as an urgent gathering. One by one, they arrived, filling our home with uneasy chatter. You could feel the curiosity, the tension. I told them to take a seat, that I had something important to share. I placed a brown envelope at the center of the coffee table. Just as we all settled in, the front door swung open and Susan walked in. She looked puzzled at first, then visibly alarmed as she noticed the crowd. What's going on? She asked. I picked up the envelope and handed it to her. Open it, I said. The color drained from her face. I thought it was about time. Everyone knew I declared facing the group. I've gathered evidence that Susan has been unfaithful to me, not just with her boss, Ted, but also with the man she met online. This envelope contains the proofs. The room went dead silent. Is this true? Susan, her sister finally broke the silence. Susan was speechless, cornered, and exposed. She glanced at me as if looking for some kind of mercy, but found none. I have copies for anyone who wants to see, I said, producing more envelopes from a bag beside me. People shifted uncomfortably, some taking the envelopes while others declined, as if the very act of holding them would be toxic. So what happens now? Asked Tom, a longtime friend. We divorce. I responded. I'll be asking for alimony. Given the circumstances, more uncomfortable glances were exchanged, but no one seemed surprised. Is there anything you'd like to say? I asked Susan, who stood there like a statue. No, she finally opened her mouth. I have nothing to say. Good. Then we are clear. I turned back to our friends and family. I didn't enjoy this, but I couldn't continue living a lie. I also didn't want Susan to fabricate some story to you all. I wanted you to hear the truth from me first. Some nodded. Others simply stared at the ground. It was a bleak atmosphere, one filled with betrayal and disappointment, but also clarity. That night, our guests trickled out, some offering me words of support, others still in a state of shock. Susan also left, presumably to stay with a friend or maybe even Ted. It didn't matter to me anymore. Sitting alone in the now empty living room, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. My marriage had crumbled, but at least I was no longer suffocating under a web of lies. I had exposed the deceit and could now start rebuilding my life on a foundation of truth. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly knowing that the hardest part was over. The divorce proceedings moved faster than I anticipated. Susan didn't put up much of a fight, perhaps because she knew any resistance would be futile. The court granted me alimony, $1,600 per month for 4 years. While the money was certainly welcome, the real prize was peace of mind. After the divorce was finalized, I took time to reinvent myself. I hit the gym, something I had put on the back burner for years. My newfound energy and vitality were not just physical. They translated into my work as well. As a real estate agent, my performance soared, landed me some lucrative deals and even an award for Agent of the Month. While my professional life was taking off, I also nurtured my personal relationships. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with and took up hobbies I'd abandoned. It was like rediscovering pieces of myself that had been buried under the weight of a failing marriage. For the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely happy. It wasn't just about getting back at Susan or escaping a doomed marriage. It was about reclaiming my life, rediscovering what made me tick and